My mother's voice didn't even tremble when she said the words. She looked past me, past my 7-year-old daughter clutching her plate of half-eaten ham, and told us to leave and never come back. I had spent 32 years begging for a seat at that mahogany table, starving for a scrap of their approval, but as I walked Harper out into the freezing Christmas night, I realized the hunger was finally gone, replaced by something much colder. The oven timer beeped, cutting through the silence of the small apartment like a referee's whistle. I jolted awake, my cheek peeling off the cool laminate of the kitchen counter where I had rested my head for just a second, or maybe 10 minutes, at 32 years old. The line between resting my eyes and passing out from sheer exhaustion had become dangerously thin. I groaned, pushing myself upright. My back popped in 3 different places, a symphony of protest against the double life I was leading. By day, I was Kennedy Hayes, the reliable, invisible claims processor at Maple Grove Mutual Insurance, processing flood damage and fender benders under fluorescent lights that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. By night, and usually into the early hours of the morning, I was the owner, baker, and dishwasher of Sweet Harbor, the custom cake business I was trying to build from scratch in my galley kitchen. I pulled the oven mitts on and opened the door. A wave of warm vanilla and spiced molasses hit me, momentarily displacing the smell of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. The layers for the Christmas cake were perfect golden brown, level, and smelling like the kind of childhood I wished I had actually lived. Carefully, I set the pans on the cooling rack. My hands were steady, even if the rest of me felt like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. I wiped a smudge of flour from my black leggings and looked around the apartment. It was small. The living room was barely large enough for the second-hand beige sofa and the television stand, and the dining area was really just a nook where Harper and I ate our macaroni and cheese, but it was ours. The walls were painted a soft, creamy yellow that the landlord had surprisingly approved, and Harper's drawings were taped up everywhere, colorful explosions of 7-year-old creativity that made the space feel alive. I walked down the short hallway to check on her. Harper was asleep, one arm thrown over her head, her breathing deep and rhythmic, the glow from her nightlight, a plastic turtle that projected stars onto the ceiling, cast weak constellations across her duvet. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall. She was the reason for the insurance job. She was the reason for the flour under my fingernails. She was the anchor that kept me from drifting away entirely. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the peace. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was, but I pulled it out anyway. Mother dinner is at 6 sharp. Please try to be on time this year, and dress appropriately. We are having the Millers over for drinks beforehand. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keypad. Appropriately. The word was a loaded weapon. It meant, don't look poor. It meant don't look like a single mother. It meant look like the daughter we wanted, not the one we got. I typed out a simple, we will be there, and hit send before I could overthink it. A moment later, a voicemail notification popped up. It was from Aunt Jo. My mother's younger sister had been the black sheep long before I inherited the title, and her absence from the family gatherings had become more frequent in recent years. I pressed the phone to my ear, keeping the volume low so I wouldn't wake Harper. Hey, kiddo. Joe's voice rasped, warm and textured like rough wool. Listen, I'm not making the trek to Brookfield this year. My tolerance for the Margaret and Charles show is at an all-time low, and my sciatica is at an all-time high. I just wanted to say Merry Christmas. Hug that little girl for me. And Kennedy, take care of that little girl and yourself first. Don't let them pick you apart. Love you. The contrast between the 2 messages made my throat tight. I deleted the notification, but Joe's words lingered in the quiet hallway. Don't let them pick you apart. It was good advice. It was also impossible. Going to my parents' house in Brookfield was like walking voluntarily into a thresher. You just hoped you came out with all your limbs attached. The next morning, Christmas Eve, broke cold and gray over Northbridge. The sky was a flat sheet of steel, threatening snow that hadn't yet decided to fall. The apartment was a flurry of activity as I tried to get the cake frosted and Harper dressed. "Do I have to wear the tights?" Harper asked, tugging at the white nylon around her ankles. "They itch." "Yes, baby, just for a little while," I said, smoothing the buttercream on the sides of the cake. "Grandma likes it when we look nice." "Why does Grandma care about my legs?" she asked, her logic piercing and undeniable. "It is just for dinner," I said, dodging the real answer, which was that Grandma cared about appearances more than she cared about comfort, happiness, or reality. I finished the cake, piping delicate holly leaves along the rim. It was a spiced chai layer cake with a honey ginger buttercream, sophisticated, elegant, professional. I placed it in the white carrier box and tied it with a red satin ribbon. As I drove us toward Brookfield, leaving the modest, siding-clad houses of Maple Grove behind for the brick mansions and manicured lawns of my parents' suburb. The old familiar knot formed in my stomach. It was a physical sensation, a tightening of the diaphragm that made it hard to take a full breath. I thought about Christmas when I was Harper's age. The memories were not of warmth, but of performance. I remembered sitting on the scratchy velvet sofa, hands folded in my lap, while my sister Lauren opened gifts that seemed to cost more than the gross national product of a small country. Lauren, 2 years younger, with her blonde curls and easy laugh, was the golden child. She demanded attention and received it. I, dark-haired and quiet, retreated into books and silence. "You are too sensitive." Kennedy. My father would say when I cried because they forgot to save me a seat at the table one year. "Stop being so dramatic." My mother would snap when I tried to tell her I felt lonely at school. I learned to be quiet. I learned that my feelings were an inconvenience. And now, 20 years later, I was still trying to prove I was worth the space I occupied. We pulled into the driveway. The house loomed, a colonial revival beast with pillars that looked like they belonged on a bank. Wreaths hung from every window, perfect and identical. My Honda Civic, with its rusted wheel well and dented bumper, looked like a blemish on the pristine asphalt. "Ready?" I asked Harper. "Killing the engine." Harper clutched her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hops, against her velvet dress. "Ready." We walked up the path, the cold biting at my cheeks. I rang the bell, and after a long pause, the heavy oak door swung open. Margaret Hayes stood there, looking like a spread in a lifestyle magazine. She wore a cashmere sweater the color of fresh cream and slacks that draped perfectly over her heels. Her hair was a motionless helmet of blonde highlights. "You made it," she said, checking her watch, and almost on time. "Merry Christmas." "Mom," I said, leaning in for a hug that she accepted with a stiff pat on my back. She looked down at Harper. "Hello? Harper, we do not bring dirty toys into the living room. Remember, you can leave the rabbit on the bench here." Harper looked at me, panic flaring in her eyes. "It is okay," I whispered. "Mr. Hops can guard the coats." I handed my mother the cake box. I made dessert. She took it, holding it slightly away from her body as if it might leak. "Oh, that is sweet of you. Kennedy, I actually ordered a Yule log from the French bakery in the city, but we can put this on the side table. It is cute that you are still doing your baking. It is my business." "Mom," I said, my voice sounding thin in the high-ceilinged foyer. "I have regular clients now." "Of course you do," she said, her tone implying that selling cookies to neighbors hardly counted as commerce. "Come in. Your sister is already here." We walked into the living room. A fire roared in the marble fireplace, but the room felt cold. Lauren was lounging on the sofa, a glass of white wine in her hand. She looked effortless, glowing with the kind of health and confidence that comes from money. "Hey, stranger," Lauren called out, not getting up. "God, look at you. You look tired." "Ken, doesn't she look tired?" "Mom, I work full-time." "Lauren," I said, forcing a smile. "And I have Harper, and the baking thing," Lauren added, taking a sip of wine. "Mark got promoted, by the way. Senior VP. We are looking at a vacation home in Aspen. You should come sometime, if you can get the time off. I mean, that sounds nice, I said. My father, Charles, entered the room then. He was a tall man who carried his paunch like a sign of authority. He held a tumbler of scotch and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Kennedy. He nodded. Hi, Dad. Still driving that scrap metal out front, he asked. I thought I saw a rust stain on the driveway. It runs fine, I said, bristling. The dinner was an exercise in endurance. We sat at the long mahogany table. The silence punctuated by the clinking of silver against china. The roast beef was dry, but I chewed it dutifully. Harper sat next to me, kicking her legs nervously, her eyes darting between her grandparents. So, Charles said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. Hear anything from, what is his name, the ex-David? I said, and no, not lately. He sends the child support when he remembers. You should have tried harder, Margaret said, cutting a piece of potato with surgical precision. To keep the marriage together, a child needs a father. He was unfaithful. Mom, I said, my grip on my fork tightening, and he drained our savings. I did not exactly have a choice. There is always a choice, she said airily. Men wander, women endure. It is how you maintain a standard of living. Look at what you have now, a cramped apartment and a job processing misery. I like my job. I lied. It is stable. And when are you going to give up this baking hobby? Charles asked, pointing his knife at me. It is distracting you. You need a real career move, something with a future. We did not pay for that degree so you could play housemaid. It is not a hobby, I said, my voice rising slightly. I made a profit last month. People like what I make. Cute, Margaret said again. That word, cute. It was a dismissal wrapped in a bow. The conversation shifted to money, as it always did. Lauren was talking about the renovations on their kitchen, the imported marble, the custom cabinetry. It must be nice, I said, trying to be conversational, to have that kind of support. Margaret's fork clattered onto her plate. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Support, she repeated. You have some nerve. Kennedy. Excuse me, I asked, genuinely confused. After all we have already spent on you, she hissed. The schooling, the wedding, the help we gave you when you were starting out, and you sit there and act like the poor relation. I blinked. What help you paid for college? Yes, and I am grateful. But I paid for my own wedding. David and I took out loans. Lauren laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. Come on, Ken. Mom and Dad helped you way more than you remember. Don't play the victim. It is getting old. I looked from Lauren to my parents. I felt a strange sense of vertigo. What are you talking about? I have been on my own since I was 22. I have never asked you for a dime. That is selective memory. Charles grumbled. We have supported you plenty. I put my fork down. My hands were shaking. I do not know what you mean, but I'm proud of what I have built. I am proud that I support Harper on my own. I do not want your strings attached. I never have. Margaret's face turned a mottled red. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the wood floor. Strings, she shouted. You ungrateful child. We have done everything for you, everything we protected you. We managed things you were too incompetent to understand. What things, I asked. Standing up too. Do not speak to your mother that way, Charles roared, slamming his hand on the table. Harper jumped, letting out a small whimper. I am just asking a question, I said. Why can't we just have a normal dinner? Why do you always have to make me feel like I am nothing because you act like nothing? Margaret screamed. She was trembling, her composure completely shattered. You come in here with your sad little cake and your second-hand clothes, and you look down on us. On this family, I don't look down on you. I said, tears pricking my eyes. I just want you to respect me. Respect is earned. Charles yelled. And you have earned nothing. You have squandered every advantage we gave you. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the fear behind their anger. I saw the desperate need to control the narrative, and for the first time, I realized that their cruelty wasn't about me. It was about something else, something they were hiding. I am done, I said quietly. Come on, Harper. I reached for my daughter's hand. Oh, run away, Margaret sneered. That is what you are good at, just like your grandmother. Do not bring Grandma into this, I said, my voice shaking. She was the only one who ever loved me for who I was. And look where it got her, Margaret spat. Dead and forgotten. If you walk out that door, Charles boomed, pointing a finger at the entryway. Do not think you are coming back. We are done. Kennedy, you leave now. You stay gone. Leave and never return. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I looked at Harper. She was crying silently, big tears rolling down her cheeks. I looked back at my parents. I saw my sister, looking down at her wine glass, refusing to meet my eyes. Okay, I said. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just felt a sudden, terrifying clarity. Okay, I repeated. I pulled Harper up from her chair. We walked out of the dining room. I didn't stop to get the cake. I didn't stop to say goodbye to the cousins who were peeking out from the kitchen doorway, their faces pale with embarrassment. Wait, Ken, let's talk. I heard a cousin mumble, but the words were faint, like static. I walked to the front door, grabbed our coats, and picked up Mr. Hops from the bench. Is Grandma mad at me? Harper sobbed as I wrestled her into her puffy coat. No, baby, I said, my voice fierce. No, they are not mad at you. They are just broken. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, freezing the tears that were finally spilling over. We walked to the car, the silence of the affluent neighborhood swallowing the sound of our footsteps. I buckled Harper in, my hands trembling so hard I could barely work the clasp. I got into the driver's seat and started the car. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the silhouette of my mother standing in the window, watching. I didn't wave. I put the car in drive and sped away, the Christmas lights of Brookfield blurring into long, jagged streaks of red and green through my tears. I was driving into the dark, with no family, no backup plan, and a 7-year-old relying on me for everything, but as the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I realized I had left something else back there, too, the hope that they would ever change, and that, I knew, was the most dangerous thing to lose. The morning sun hit the blinds of my bedroom window with a cheerful aggression that felt entirely personal. I woke up not with the slow drift of consciousness, but with a sudden, gasping intake of breath. My hand flying to my chest, the physical sensation was immediate, a hard, cold knot right beneath my sternum, as if I had swallowed a stone during the night. For a few seconds, the room felt safe. Just the beige walls, the hum of the radiator, the pile of laundry on the chair. Then memory rushed in like a dam breaking, the mahogany table, the pity in the cousin's eyes, the way my father's finger had pointed at the door like a loaded gun. Leave and never return. I threw the covers off, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My feet hit the cold floor, grounding me. I had to get up. I had a 7-year-old in the next room who needed breakfast, and I needed to pretend that her world hadn't just tilted on its axis, in the kitchen. I went through the motions of normalcy. I mixed flour, baking powder, salt, and milk. I whisked the batter until my arm ached, focusing entirely on the yellow swirl of the eggs disappearing into the white. The rhythm was soothing. Pour, flip, wait, pour, flip, wait. By the time Harper shuffled into the kitchen, dragging Mr. Hops by a velvet ear, I had a stack of pancakes that looked like a magazine cover. "Mommy," she asked, climbing onto her stool. Her voice was small, laced with a hesitation that broke my heart. "Good morning, Bug," I said, forcing a brightness into my tone that I did not feel. I slid a plate in front of her, chocolate chip, special occasion. She poked at the stack with her fork. "Are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa today? Usually we go back for leftovers." I froze, the spatula hovering over the skillet. I turned off the burner and turned to face her. I crouched down so we were eye to eye. "No, sweetie, we are not going back today. Because we were bad," she asked. Her lower lip trembled. A tiny earthquake of insecurity. I reached out and took her small hands in mine. Her fingers were sticky with syrup, but I held them tight. Look at me. Harper, you were not bad. You were perfect. You are always perfect. Then why did Grandpa yell, "Why did we have to leave?" I took a deep breath, searching for the words that would explain the inexplicable without poisoning her against her own blood. Adults are complicated. Harper, sometimes, when people are very upset or feeling big feelings they do not know how to handle. They say things that are hurtful. They say things they might not mean, or things that come from a place of anger inside them. Is Grandpa angry at me? No, I said firmly. He was angry at the situation. He was angry at me. But that is grown-up stuff. It has nothing to do with you being a good girl. Do you understand? She nodded slowly, though I could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. Can we watch cartoons? Yes, I said, kissing her forehead. You can watch as many cartoons as you want. After she was settled on the sofa, bathed in the glow of the television, I retreated to the kitchen and finally looked at my phone. It had been buzzing silently on the counter for the last hour, a digital bomb waiting to detonate. I unlocked the screen. The notifications spilled out in a cascade of anxiety. There were 3 texts from my cousin Sarah. Ken, I am so sorry. I didn't know what to say. It was awful. I hope you guys got home safe. Call me when you can. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Sarah was nice, but she was terrified of rocking the boat. She would never stand up to Margaret Hayes. Then came a voicemail from Lauren. I pressed the phone to my ear, bracing myself. Kennedy! Seriously. Lauren's voice was high, tight with annoyance. I am calling because Mom is literally in tears this morning. I do not know what you were trying to prove last night, but making a scene like that in front of the Millers and everyone, it was selfish. You know how Dad gets when he drinks. You should have just nodded and shut up. Now the whole holiday is ruined. Call Mom and apologize. Fix this. I deleted the message before I could listen to it a second time. Fix this. As if my existence was a plumbing leak. Then, at the bottom of the list, a text from my mother. It was sent at 2 a.m. You chose to walk out. Do not twist the story. We set standards in this house. If you cannot meet them, that is your failure, not ours. Do not expect us to chase you. I stared at the words. You chose to walk out. It was a masterclass in revisionist history. They had told me to leave. They had banished me. But in Margaret's mind, my compliance was an act of rebellion. I put the phone face down on the counter. I felt like I was floating in deep space. The tether to the mothership severed. It was terrifying, yes. But as I looked around my small, sunlit kitchen, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the next text. I wasn't wondering how to twist myself into a shape that would please them. I was just done. The holidays blurred into a gray slush of January. I went back to work at Maple Grove Mutual, grateful for the mindless rhythm of claims processing. There was safety in paperwork. Flooded basements and hail-damaged roofs were disasters I could quantify. They had deductibles and coverage limits. They made sense, but I wasn't okay. I knew it. My coworkers knew it. I would find myself staring at my computer screen for 20 minutes, the cursor blinking at me like a mocking eye, while my mind replayed the argument at the dinner table. One Tuesday in late January, Nolan Reed stopped by my cubicle. Nolan was one of the accountants, a man in his mid-30s with a penchant for sweater vests and a kindness that seemed out of place in a corporate office. He had been a steady friend since I started, the kind of guy who remembered Harper's birthday and always had a spare charger when mine died. "Hey," he said, leaning against the gray partition. "You have been staring at that same hurricane claim for half an hour. Everything okay?" I jumped, minimizing the window. "Oh, hi, Nolan. Yeah, just tired. Harper has a cold." Nolan raised an eyebrow. He adjusted his glasses. "Kennedy, I have known you for 3 years. You look like you are carrying a piano on your back." I sighed, slumping in my chair. "It is just family stuff. The holidays were rough. I heard," he said gently. "Maple Grove is a small town. Kennedy, people talk. I heard your parents gave you a hard time. That is a polite way of putting it," I muttered. They kicked me out, told me never to come back. Nolan's face softened into genuine concern. He pulled up a chair from the empty desk next to mine and sat down. "That is heavy," he said. "Look, I am not going to pretend to know your family dynamic, but I grew up with a father who thought love was something you traded for obedience. It messes with your head." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. I just keep thinking I should have done something different. Maybe if I hadn't argued back. Nolan shook his head. "If you hadn't argued back, they would have found another reason. Control is not about what you do, Kennedy. It is about what they need." He wrote something on a sticky note and stuck it to my monitor. "This is the number for a community counseling center on 4th Street, he said. "They have a sliding scale, and they have a support group for people like us, adult children of difficult families." I looked at the yellow square. "Therapy? I do not know. Nolan. I can barely afford rent right now. It is sliding scale," he repeated. "It might cost you $20 a session. Think about it. You cannot carry that piano forever. Eventually, it crushes you." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was right. I was being crushed. "Thank you," I whispered. The therapist's name was Dr. Evans. She was a woman with gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that seemed to see right through my defenses. Her office smelled like lavender and old paper. For the first 2 sessions, I just cried. I sat on her beige couch and wept until I was dehydrated, releasing 30 years of held breath. In the 3rd session, we started to do the work. "So, Doctor," Evans said, clasping her hands, "you say you feel guilty. Tell me what you are guilty of." I was ungrateful. I said, "Reciting the script my mother had written for me. They gave me so much. They paid for college." "Did they pay for college because they wanted you to learn? Or because having an educated daughter looked good for them?" she asked. I paused. They wanted me to have a career, but only a specific kind of career. When I wanted to study art, my father said he wouldn't pay for finger painting, so I studied business. And now you bake," she noted with a small smile. "Yes, it is the only thing that feels like mine, Doctor." Evans leaned forward. "Kennedy, there is a term we use for this. It is called transactional love. It means that affection and support are treated like a business deal. If you perform well, you get paid in approval. If you underperform, the contract is voided. That is not how a parent loves a child. A parent's love should be a baseline, not a bonus." I stared at the floor. "But they spent money on me," Margaret said. "She said I was a financial burden." "Children are financial burdens. Kennedy, Doctor," Evans said dryly. "That is the nature of having children. You do not send them a bill when they turn 18. Do you send Harper a bill for her pancakes?" "No," I said, horrified. "Of course not." "Then why do you accept that logic for yourself?" The question hung in the air. I didn't have an answer. But for the first time, I began to see the invisible threads that had been wrapped around me. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was an investment. And because I hadn't yielded the return, they wanted a high-powered career, a wealthy husband, a compliant personality. They had decided to cut their losses. It was a Tuesday evening in early February when the envelope arrived. I had just put Harper to bed and was sorting through the mail on the kitchen counter. Mostly junk, a flyer for pizza, a bill for the electric, and then a thick, heavy envelope made of coarse brown paper. The return address was Cedar Hollow County Treasurer's Office. I frowned. Cedar Hollow was 2 hours north, a sleepy collection of towns nestled in the pine forests where my family used to summer. We hadn't been there in years. I tore open the flap. Inside was a stack of documents, the paper crisp and official. I unfolded the top letter. Notice of delinquent property taxes to Kennedy L. Hayes, R.E. Property. ID 04-119-22, commonly known as 44 Pine Ridge Road, Cedar Hollow. Dear Ms. Hayes, this notice serves as a final warning regarding unpaid property taxes on the above-referenced parcel. Our records indicate that taxes for the years 2023, 2024, and 2025 remain outstanding, totaling $4,822.16 $4,822.16, including interest and penalties. Failure to remit payment within 60 days may result in the placement of a tax lien against the property or the initiation of seizure proceedings by the county. I read the letter 3 times. My hands started to shake. Kennedy L. Hayes, that was me. But the property? 44 Pine Ridge Road. That was the cabin. Grandma Eleanor's cabin. I sat down heavily on one of the kitchen stools. My mind raced, trying to make the pieces fit. Grandma Eleanor had died 6 years ago, after the funeral. My parents had told us that the cabin was too much work, that the upkeep was a drain. They said they had sold it to a developer to simplify the estate. I remembered crying about it. That cabin was the only place I had ever felt truly safe. It smelled of wood smoke and old paperbacks. It was where Grandma taught me to bake bread. It was where I hid when my mother's criticism became too sharp. How could I owe taxes on a cabin that was sold years ago, and why was the notice addressed to me? I grabbed my phone. My thumb hovered over my mother's name, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't handle her voice. Instead, I called Lauren. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding breathless. "Hello, Lauren. It's me. Don't hang up." "Kennedy, look. I am rushing out to dinner with Mark's clients. What do you want?" "I just got a letter," I said, keeping my voice steady. "From the Cedar Hollow treasurer. It says I owe nearly $5,000 in back taxes on the cabin." There was a pause, a silence that felt heavy and textured. "That is ridiculous," Lauren said, her tone snapping back to dismissive. "The cabin belongs to Mom and Dad." "Well, it did. They sold it ages ago." "That is what I thought." I said, "But this notice is in my name. Kennedy L. Hayes. It says I am the owner, and it says the taxes haven't been paid in 3 years. Lauren sighed. A long, exasperated sound. "It is obviously some bureaucratic error. Kennedy, you know how those county offices are. They probably just mixed up the names because you were on some old paperwork or something, but it threatens seizure. Lauren, so it is a mistake. Just throw it away, or call them and tell them they have the wrong person." God, you are always looking for drama. "I am not looking for drama," I said, gripping the phone tight. "I am looking at a legal document that says I own a house I didn't know I had. Listen, Mom and Dad handled the estate. They handled everything. If they say the cabin is gone, it is gone. Do not go stirring up trouble just because you are bored and bitter. I have to go." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Bureaucratic error. It was plausible, but the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. My parents were meticulous about money. They didn't make errors. They made plans. I went to my bedroom and dragged my old plastic file box out from under the bed. It contained the detritus of my life birth certificates, old tax returns, Harper's vaccination records. I started digging, looking for anything related to Grandma Eleanor. I found a stack of old birthday cards, her wavering cursive wishing me love and bravery. I found a photo of us on the porch of the cabin, me with flour on my nose, her laughing. And then, tucked into the back of a high school yearbook, I found it. It was a single, faded bank statement. First National Bank of Northbridge. The account name read Eleanor Vance, FBO, Kennedy Hayes. Granddaughter savings. I remembered the day she showed it to me. I was 19. She had pulled me aside in the kitchen of the cabin and pressed the paper into my hand. "This is for you. Kenny," she had whispered, "for when you need to start your own life. Don't let Margaret absorb it." The balance on the statement, dated 10 years ago, was $12,000. When Grandma died, I had asked about the account. Margaret had told me she moved it for safekeeping and rolled it into a family trust to protect it from taxes. She said it was being managed for my future. I had never seen a penny of it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I looked at the tax notice on the counter, then at the bank statement, then at the phone. I dialed Aunt Jo. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello, Aunt Jo. It's Kennedy." "Kennedy. Is everything okay?" "You sound breathless." I told her everything. The dinner, the estrangement, and now, the letter from the treasurer. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Joe," I asked. "I am here," she said, her voice sounding older, sadder. "Oh, Kennedy, I wondered if this day would come." "What do you mean?" Joe sighed. "Your grandmother. She and I were close. You know that. Towards the end, when she got sick. She worried about you constantly. She saw how Margaret treated you. She saw how you were always the scapegoat. I closed my eyes, letting the validation wash over me. She told me," Joe continued, her voice gaining strength, "that she wanted to leave the Cedar Hollow cabin to you, specifically to you. She said she wanted you to have a place to escape to. She used those exact words. A place Kennedy can go when the family becomes too much. But Mom said it was sold." I said, "Your mother says a lot of things," Joe said darkly. "Eleanor told me she was drawing up the papers. She wanted the cabin and that savings account to go directly to you and any children you might have. She didn't trust Charles with it. She said Charles was too fond of leveraging assets to cover his own bad bets." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did you ever see the will?" I asked. "No," Joe said. "I never saw the final paperwork. After she died, Margaret and Charles swooped in. They had their own lawyers. They told me everything was left to the family estate. I didn't have the money or the standing to challenge them. And you were so young, and you were trying so hard to please them. I didn't want to start a war that would just hurt you more." I looked at the tax notice again. "Joe, I think they never sold it. I think they just stopped paying for it. And if my name is on this notice, then the deed might be in your name," Joe finished. "Which means they have been hiding it from you for 6 years. 6 years. 6 years of struggling to pay rent. 6 years of feeling like a failure while I owned a home I wasn't allowed to enter." "What do?" I whispered. Joe's voice was firm. "You stop asking them for permission, Kennedy, and you stop believing their version of the story. You find out the truth." I hung up the phone. The apartment was quiet. Harper was asleep. The radiator clanked in the corner. I looked at the tax bill. $4,822.16. It was a terrifying number. But as I traced the letters of my name, Kennedy L., Hayes printed in bold black ink, I didn't feel just fear anymore. I felt something new, something hot and bright and dangerous. I felt like fighting back. The Saturday morning sky was the color of a bruised plum, hanging low and heavy over the highway as we drove north. I had told Harper we were going on an adventure, a word that holds a lot of weight when you are 7 years old. To her, it meant dragons and hidden treasure. To me, it meant confronting a ghost I had been trying to ignore for 6 years. "Are we there yet?" Harper asked from the back seat. Her voice muffled slightly by the sketchbook she was holding in front of her face. "Almost bug," I said, gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. The heater in the Civic was rattling, fighting a losing battle against the February chill that seemed to seep through the glass. About 20 more minutes. I looked in the rearview mirror. Harper had missed her. Hops buckled into the seat next to her. She was drawing furiously, her tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth. She didn't know that the destination was a rundown cabin that might be the center of a family war. She didn't know that her mother was terrified. The landscape had changed. We had left the sprawling, manicured suburbs of Brookfield and the dense, practical grid of Maple Grove far behind. Here, the road narrowed. The trees grew taller, pines and oaks crowding the asphalt, their branches bare and skeletal against the gray sky. Patches of old snow, hardened into ice, clung to the ditches. This was Cedar Hollow. As we turned onto Pine Ridge Road, my heart began to hammer against my ribs. It had been years since I drove this route. The last time was the summer before Grandma Eleanor got sick. I remembered the way the sunlight used to filter through the canopy, dappling the windshield. Now, the woods felt closed in, silent and watching. "There it is," Harper shouted, pointing a marker-stained finger at a break in the trees. I slowed the car, the gravel crunching loudly under the tires as I turned into the driveway. The cabin sat on a small rise, overlooking a frozen creek. It was a modest structure, built of cedar logs that had once been a warm, honey brown. Now, they were gray and weathered, stripped of their finish by years of neglect. The front porch sagged on the left side, and a shutter hung crookedly from one of the upstairs windows, banging softly in the wind. But the thing that made me stop the car abruptly was the sign. Nailed to the trunk of the old oak tree by the driveway was a bright orange square of plastic, stark and ugly against the muted winter colors. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Managed by Hayes Properties. I turned off the engine. The silence that rushed in was deafening. Mommy Harper asked, sensing the shift in my mood, "Why is the house sad?" "It is just old, honey," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "Just a little tired." I stepped out of the car. The air was biting, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. I walked up the driveway, my boots sinking into the crust of snow. I reached the porch stairs and tested the first one. It held, though it groaned in protest. I walked to the front door. It was painted a deep forest green, the paint peeling in long, curling strips. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key. The brass key I had kept on my ring since I was 16. The one Grandma gave me when I got my driver's license. I slid it into the lock. It went in halfway and stopped. I jiggled it. I pulled it back and tried again. Nothing. The tumblers were seized. Or the lock had been changed. I stood there, shivering, staring at the brass hardware. Managed by Hayes Properties. My parents. They had locked me out. They had put up a sign to keep strangers away. And apparently, I was the stranger. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were numb, making it hard to type. I found the number for the Cedar Hollow County Treasurer, the one from the tax letter, and hit call. It was a Saturday, but the letter had listed an automated system for verifying account status, and I prayed there might be an emergency line or a clerk working overtime. To my surprise, a real person answered after 3 rings, a woman with a voice like dry leaves. "County Clerk's office." "Hi," I said, my voice shaking. "I am calling to verify the ownership of a property. I have a tax bill here." "Address?" she asked, sounding bored. 44 Pine Ridge Road. I heard the clacking of a keyboard. A long pause followed. "Owner of record is Kennedy L. Hayes," the woman said. "Status is delinquent. We are preparing a lien. Are there any other owners listed?" I asked. "A trust. A management company." The typing stopped. "No, ma'am. Just Kennedy L. Hayes, sole owner since transfer in 2019. "Transfer?" I asked. "From who?" "From the estate of Eleanor Vance." I closed my eyes. The wind bit at my face, but I felt a flush of heat. "Sole owner. Thank you," I whispered, and ended the call. I turned back to the car. Harper was watching me through the window, her breath fogging the glass. I was the owner. This rotting porch, this peeling paint, this frozen piece of earth, it was mine, and my parents had let it rot rather than tell me. "Kennedy." The voice came from the road. I jumped, spinning around, standing at the edge of the driveway. Wrapped in a thick wool coat and a colorful knitted scarf was a small, elderly woman. She held a walking stick in one hand and a leash in the other, attached to a beagle that looked as old as the hills. "Mrs. Delgado?" I asked, squinting. She stepped closer, her eyes widening behind her glasses. "Kennedy, is that you, Dios mío? Look at you." Mrs. Rosario Delgado had been Grandma Eleanor's nearest neighbor for 20 years. She lived in the yellow cottage down the road. I remembered her bringing over empanadas in the summers, her laugh echoing through the trees. "It is me," I said, walking down the steps to meet her. She dropped the walking stick and pulled me into a hug that smelled of lavender laundry detergent. "You were such a little thing the last time I saw you," she said, pulling back to look at my face. "And now, oh, you look just like her. Around the eyes." I fought back tears. "Thank you, Mrs. Delgado. This is my daughter, Harper." Harper had climbed out of the car. Clutching Mr. Hops, she looked at Mrs. Delgado with wide, curious eyes. "Hello, little one," Mrs. Delgado cooed. You look frozen solid. You two come with me. I have hot cocoa on the stove, and I think I have some cookies, if my grandson didn't eat them all. We followed her down the road to her cottage. It was warm inside, a stark contrast to the hollow feeling of the cabin. The kitchen was cluttered and cozy, filled with the smell of cinnamon and chocolate. Mrs. Delgado set a steaming mug in front of Harper, who took a tentative sip and then smiled, a milk mustache instantly appearing on her upper lip. "So, Mrs. Delgado said, sitting down across from me at the small circular table, "you finally came back. I didn't know I could," I admitted, wrapping my hands around my own mug. "I didn't know the cabin was mine until a few weeks ago." Mrs. Delgado frowned, her eyebrows knitting together. "What do you mean Eleanor told me she was leaving it to you? She talked about it all the time those last few months. My parents told me it was sold," I said quietly. "To a developer." Mrs. Delgado let out a sharp breath, a sound of disgust. "Those two, I am sorry. Kennedy, but your parents, they are difficult people. You can say that," I said with a dry laugh. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I remember the day, about a year before Eleanor passed. It was spring, but it was raining hard. I saw Charles and Margaret's car pull up, a big black sedan, and there was another man with them, a suit, carried a briefcase. A lawyer, I asked. Mrs. Delgado nodded. He looked like one. They were in there for hours. I was gardening well, trying to, in the mud, and I could hear the shouting from my yard. Charles was yelling. Margaret was pacing on the porch. Eleanor. She never raised her voice. But when they left, she came over here. She looked small. What did she say? I asked, my heart pounding. She said they wanted her to sign something, to consolidate the assets. She said they told her she was too old to manage her own affairs, that she was making mistakes. She was heartbroken. Kennedy, she told me, I want to leave this place to my brave granddaughter. She is the only one who knows what home means. I bit my lip, hard. My brave granddaughter. She was worried they would trick her. Mrs. Delgado continued, or that they would bully her into changing her mind. But she was stubborn. Your grandmother, I looked out the window at the woods separating our houses. She left it to me, but I don't have a key. The locks were changed. Mrs. Delgado smiled then, a mischievous glint in her eye. She got up and walked to a ceramic jar on her counter. She dug her hand in, passed the rubber bands and paper clips, and pulled out a small silver key on a faded red ribbon. She gave me this. Mrs. Delgado said, pressing it into my hand. A week after that argument, she said, Rosario, keep this for Kennedy, just in case. I stared at the key. It felt heavy in my palm. The walk back to the cabin felt different. I wasn't just a trespasser anymore. I was an owner with a key. Mrs. Delgado had stayed behind. Sensing I needed to do this alone with Harper, we walked up the porch steps again. I ignored the orange sign. I ignored the rotting wood. I put the silver key in the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. The door creaked open, revealing a cavern of shadows. The air inside was stale, smelling of dust and mouse droppings and the ghost of wood smoke. Stay close. Harper, I said, taking her hand. We stepped inside. The living room was exactly as I remembered, and yet completely different. The furniture was covered in white sheets, looking like spectral lumps in the dim light. The fireplace was cold and black. Why is everything covered up? Harper whispered. To keep the dust off, I said. I walked to the kitchen. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood. The linoleum was peeling at the corners. The refrigerator door was slightly ajar. I went straight to the lower cabinets under the sink. It was a hiding spot Grandma and I used to use for hide and seek, but it was also where she kept the things she didn't want my father to find: her stash of expensive chocolate, her journal, her emergency cash. I crouched down and opened the cabinet doors. It was empty, save for a few rusted pipes and a bottle of cleaner that had turned yellow with age. I felt a surge of disappointment. Had they taken everything? Then I saw it. Tucked way in the back, wedged between the pipe and the wall, was a dented green tin box. It used to hold loose tea. I reached in, my fingers brushing against cobwebs. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I set it on the dusty kitchen table. It was locked with a tiny padlock, the kind you'd find on a diary. "Do you have a key for that too?" Harper asked, leaning her chin on the table. "No," I said, "but Grandma taught me a trick. I took a bobby pin for my hair. I wasn't a locksmith, but this was a cheap lock, and Grandma had shown me how to pick it when I lost the key to my diary in 7th grade. A woman should know how to get into places people want to keep her out of," she had said. I wiggled the pin. Twist, push, turn, click. The padlock sprang open. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were no tea leaves. Instead, there was a stack of papers, tied together with a blue ribbon, and on top, a white envelope with my name on it in Grandma's shaky, elegant script, for Kennedy. My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope. I sat down on one of the dust-sheeted chairs. "Can I draw while you read?" Harper asked, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Yes, baby. Draw the house. Draw it how it should look." I opened the letter. "My dearest Kennedy, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and hopefully, you are standing in our kitchen. I am sorry I could not give this to you myself. I am writing this because I am afraid. Not of dying, that is just the next part of the journey, but of what will happen to the things I love when I am not here to protect them. Your parents, my own daughter Margaret and her husband, they see the world differently than we do. They see people as extensions of their image. They see assets to be managed, not lives to be lived. They have been pressuring me to put the cabin and my savings into a family trust. They say it is for efficiency, but I know it is for control. They do not want you to be independent, Kennedy. They want you to need them, because as long as you need them, they can tell you who to be. I watched them do it to your sister, and I have watched them try to do it to you. I am leaving this cabin to you, not to the family, to you. And the savings account at First National that is yours too. I want you to always have a home that is yours, not theirs. A place where you do not have to apologize for existing. Be brave, my sweet girl. You have a spine of steel, even if they have tried to make you think it is glass. Love, Grandma." I put the letter down. The tears came hot and fast, dripping off my chin onto the dusty table. Extensions of their image. It was the most accurate description of my childhood I had ever heard. I wiped my face and looked at the other papers in the box. There was a photocopy of a document titled Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Vance. It was dated 2018. In the margins, there were angry, slashing notes in red ink my father's handwriting. Unacceptable. Too exposed to liability. Need to combine everything into one family plan. And then, a second document. The Hayes Family Cabin Trust. This one was unsigned. It listed Charles and Margaret as sole trustees, with discretionary power to distribute assets to beneficiaries. I realized then what had happened. They had tried to force her to sign the trust. She had refused. She had written a will leaving it to me, and somehow they had buried it, or they had ignored it, counting on the fact that I was too beaten down, too broke, and too scared to ever check the public records. They had bet on my weakness. I looked at Harper. She was sketching furiously, her tongue poking out. She had drawn the cabin, but in her picture, the paint was bright green. Smoke was curling from the chimney, and there were flowers in the window boxes. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I took the documents. "We are going to fix it." "Harper," I said, my voice sounding louder in the empty room. "Fix the house," she asked. "The house," I said, standing up, "and everything else." On Monday morning, I called in sick to the insurance firm. It was the first time in 3 years I had missed a day. I didn't care. I drove to downtown Maple Grove, to a small brick building on Main Street with a sign that read, Maya Collins, attorney at law. Nolan had recommended her. "She's sharky," he had said, "but she's honest." Maya Collins was a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a messy bun held together by what looked like a chopstick. She listened to me without interrupting for 20 minutes. She looked at the tax notice. She read Grandma's letter. She examined the photocopy of the draft will. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and took a long sip of coffee. "Okay," she said. "Here is the situation. It is messy, but it is not hopeless." She tapped the tax notice. "This is your golden ticket. Kennedy, the county recognizes you as the owner. That means the deed was recorded. At some point, either your grandmother executed a deed before she died, or the will was probated and the title transferred." But if the title transferred, why didn't I know I asked? Because mailing addresses can be changed. Maya said, "If your parents were the executors of the estate, they could have listed their address, or a P.O. box, for the tax bills. They paid the taxes for a few years to keep it quiet, and then they stopped." I said. Maya nodded. "They stopped. Maybe they ran out of money. Maybe they just got arrogant. Or maybe—" She paused, tapping a pen against her chin. "Maybe what, Kennedy? Tell me about Christmas again. The argument." I recounted it. The criticism, the money comments, the banishment. Maya's eyes narrowed. "There is a clause in many estate plans," she said slowly. "It is called an in terrorem clause, or a no contest clause. Basically, if a beneficiary challenges the will, they get disinherited. But there is another strategy, less legal and more psychological. It is the estrangement defense." "What is that?" "If a trustee your parents wants to cut a beneficiary out of a trust or an asset, they need a reason that looks good to a judge if it ever goes to court. Kennedy is unstable. Kennedy is estranged. We lost contact with Kennedy. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You think they picked a fight?" I whispered. Maya shrugged. "I think the timing is suspicious. You get kicked out in December. The tax notices, which have probably been piling up somewhere, go unpaid. If the county seizes the cabin, your parents can buy it back at auction for pennies on the dollar, free and clear of your claim, or if you never found out. It would just vanish, and if you tried to ask about the estate later, they could say, 'Well, we are estranged. She never asked. She abandoned the property.'" They wanted me to leave. I realized they wanted a clean break so they could finish burying the body. "It is a possibility," Maya said. "But right now, we deal with facts." She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "Step 1. We pay the taxes. Can you cover the $4,000? I have some savings." I said, "It will wipe me out." "But I can do it." "Do it," Maya said firmly. "Today, stop the seizure." Step 2. We quietly, very quietly request the official copies of the deed, the final probated will, and any trust documents filed with the court. We do not alert your parents yet. We want to see the paper trail before they know we are looking. "And if they stole it," I asked, "if they took the money Grandma left me, then we sue them," Maya said, "for breach of fiduciary duty, for fraud, for conversion." She looked at me, her expression serious. "But Kennedy, you need to be ready. If we pull this thread, the whole sweater is going to unravel. Your parents will not react well. They will attack your character. They will use your divorce. They will use your financial struggles. They will try to make you look like a greedy, incompetent daughter." I thought about the letter in my pocket, a spine of steel. I thought about Harper drawing flowers on a rotting house. "Let them try," I said. Maya smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "Good," she said. "Then let's get to work." That afternoon, I wired the money to the Cedar Hollow treasurer. My bank account balance dropped to double digits. I stared at the number $84.12 and felt a wave of nausea. But then I looked at the confirmation number on the screen. Payment received. Lien process halted. I had bought us time. I picked Harper up from school. She was chattering about a painting they made in art class. "We made family trees," she said, buckling her seatbelt. I froze. "Oh yeah," she said. "Mrs. Gable said to draw everyone we love." "Who did you draw?" I asked, watching her in the rearview mirror. "I drew you," she said. "And I drew Mr. Hops, and I drew Grandma Eleanor, even though I don't remember her much. And I drew Mrs. Delgado and her dog. Anyone else?" I asked, my throat tight. She paused. I didn't draw Grandpa Charles or Grandma Margaret. Why not? Baby. Because, she said, looking out the window at the passing snow. Trees need sun to grow. Mommy, and they are just cold. I reached back and squeezed her knee. You are so smart. Harper, I whispered. We drove home to our small apartment. The radiator was clanking. The fridge was humming. It wasn't a cabin in the woods. It wasn't a mansion in Brookfield. But as I locked the door and turned on the lights, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. I wasn't just Kennedy the claims processor anymore. I wasn't just the disappointment. I was the owner of 44 Pine Ridge Road, and I was going to war. The weeks that followed the trip to Cedar Hollow were defined by a grinding. Gray patience. January in Northbridge was less a month and more of an endurance test. The sky remained a stubborn slate color, and the snow on the roadsides turned from pristine white to a hard, dirty charcoal that refused to melt. I threw myself into the architecture of Harper's life. I became obsessed with the routine, clinging to it like a life raft. Wake up at 6, coffee, oatmeal, pack the lunchbox with the crusts cut off the sandwich just the way she liked. School drop-off at 7:45, work, pick up at 3, homework, dinner, bath, bed. It was a loop, safe and predictable, a stark contrast to the chaotic static in my head. Harper, resilient as only a 7-year-old can be, had mostly stopped asking why we hadn't gone back to Brookfield for Sunday dinners. But the questions hadn't disappeared. They had just changed shape. Mommy, she asked one Tuesday while I was braiding her hair for school, do Grandma and Grandpa miss us? My fingers paused in her fine, dark hair. I looked at our reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired. There were shadows under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I am sure they think about us, I said carefully. But remember, grown-ups have some things to figure out right now, big things, and until we figure them out, we have to give each other some space. Like a timeout, she asked. I tied off the braid with a pink elastic, exactly like a timeout. I did not tell her that this timeout felt permanent. I did not tell her that every time my phone buzzed, my heart hammered against my ribs, hoping and fearing it was my mother, while I managed the domestic front. Maya Collins was quietly dismantling the secrets of my family's financial history. She worked with the precision of a surgeon every few days. I would get an email or a call, usually while I was processing insurance claims at my desk, hiding the legal drama behind spreadsheets of flood damage. Kennedy, can you come by the office after work? She asked one afternoon in early February. I have the deed records, and I have the bank statements. I left Harper with a neighbor for an hour and drove to Maya's office. The heat in the building was cranked up too high, stifling and dry. Maya had files spread across her desk. She didn't waste time with small talk. Okay, she said, pointing to a document with an official county seal. Here's the deed. You were right. The transfer happened in 2019. Eleanor's estate executor, your father signed the deed transferring 44 Pine Ridge Road to Kennedy L. Hayes. So I have owned it for 5 years. I said, staring at the paper, legally, yes, but here's where it gets interesting. She slid a stack of bank statements toward me. They were redacted, heavy black lines crossing out account numbers, but the transaction lines were highlighted in yellow. These were obtained through a discovery request regarding the tax payments. Maya explained, look at the source of funds. I looked. From 2019 through 2022, the property taxes on the cabin were paid via electronic transfer. Payer C.M. Hayes, Joint Revocable Trust. My parents, I whispered. They paid the taxes for 3 years. Maya said, they knew the property was in your name. They knew the bills were being generated. They paid them to keep the account current, likely so you would never receive a notice and never ask questions. And then they stopped. I said, why? Maya leaned back, tapping a pen against her lip. The payments stopped 14 months ago, around the time you mentioned your car broke down, and you asked them for a small loan, which they refused. I remembered that. I had asked for $500. My father had given me a lecture on fiscal responsibility that lasted 40 minutes. It is a control mechanism, Maya said. As long as they paid the taxes, they controlled the asset. They could use the cabin, maintain it, or let it rot, and you would never know. But stopping the payments, that puts the liability on you. If the county seized it, the problem goes away. If you found out, you would be in debt. It is punitive. I felt a cold flush of anger. They let it accrue interest and penalties. They let it get to the brink of seizure. It gets murkier. Maya continued, pulling out another document. This is Eleanor's final probated will. I took the paper. It was thick, bonded legal stationery. Article 4 transfers the bulk of her assets, her investment portfolio, her primary residence, her jewelry into the Hayes family trust. Your parents are the trustees. The language regarding beneficiaries, you and Lauren, is incredibly vague. She read aloud, the trustees shall use the income and principal of the trust to support the health, education, and maintenance of the grantor's grandchildren, as the trustees, in their sole and absolute discretion, deem necessary, sole and absolute discretion. I repeated, that means they can give Lauren a down payment for a house and give me nothing. Exactly, Maya said, and legally, that is hard to challenge. But here's the smoking gun. The will does not mention the cabin. Not once. What does that mean? It means the cabin wasn't part of the trust assets, Maya said, her eyes gleaming. It was a specific bequest, a separate gift. By transferring the deed to you directly, your father actually followed the letter of the law regarding the cabin, probably to avoid tax complications for himself. But then he hid the keys. He hid the existence of the property. He acted as the de facto owner while leaving you with the legal risk. So what do? I asked. Maya sighed. We need to talk to them. Before we file a lawsuit, we have to make a good faith effort to resolve this. It looks better for us in court if we try to be reasonable first. You need to send them an email. I felt my stomach drop. An email. Keep it simple. Maya advised. Do not be angry. Do not accuse them of fraud yet. Just state the facts. You found the tax notice. You know you own the cabin. You want to discuss the trust and the savings account Eleanor mentioned. That night, after Harper was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. The cursor blinked on the white screen, a rhythmic taunt. I wrote 5 drafts. The first was screaming with rage. The second was pathetic and pleading. The third was too cold. Finally, I settled on the 4th version. Dear Mom and Dad, I am writing because I recently received a notice from Cedar Hollow County regarding unpaid taxes on the cabin at 44 Pine Ridge Road. I was surprised to learn that the deed to this property is in my name and has been since 2019. I have paid the outstanding taxes to prevent seizure. However, I am confused as to why I was never informed of this transfer, and why the taxes were previously paid by you without my knowledge. Additionally, I have found correspondence from Grandma Eleanor mentioning a savings account intended for me. Given that I am evidently the owner of the cabin, I would like to sit down and discuss the details of Eleanor's estate, the family trust, and how these assets were intended to be managed. Please let me know when you're available to talk. I want to clear this up. Kennedy. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. The waiting was agony. I checked my email every 10 minutes. I checked it in the middle of the night. I checked it while I was frosting cookies. 2 days passed, then 3. On the 4th day, a notification popped up on my phone. New email reception. PetersonFinchLaw.com. Subject RE. Estate Inquiry /Kennedy Hayes. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. It wasn't from my mother. It wasn't from my father. I opened it. Ms. Hayes. Please be advised that this firm represents Charles and Margaret Hayes in all matters regarding the estate of Eleanor Vance and the Hayes Family Trust. Your recent correspondence has been forwarded to our office. Our clients maintain that they have acted within their discretion as trustees and parents. The transfer of the Cedar Hollow property was executed for estate planning purposes. Any tax liability associated with the property is the sole responsibility of the deed holder. Regarding your inquiry into other assets, the trust documents are private. Our clients consider this matter closed. Please direct all future communication to the undersigned. Do not contact our clients directly. Sincerely, Preston Finch, Esquire. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Do not contact our clients directly. They weren't my parents anymore. They were clients. They hadn't even dignified me with a personal rejection. They had hired a stranger in a suit to tell me to go away. The pain was different than the anger I had felt at Christmas. This was a hollow, aching grief. It was the final confirmation that to them, I was not a person to be loved, but a problem to be managed. I called Nolan. I didn't even say hello. I just read him the email, my voice cracking on the legal jargon. When I finished, there was a heavy silence on the line. "Kennedy," Nolan said, his voice low and angry. "That is cold, even for them. They hired a lawyer." "Nolan?" I said, pacing my small living room. "I sent them an email asking to talk, and they sent me a cease and desist letter. They are scared." Nolan said, "Scared? They are rich, powerful, and mean. They are not scared." "Yes, they are," he insisted. "You do not hire Preston Finch unless you are worried someone is about to look under the hood. They know you found the cabin. They know you are asking about the money. They are circling the wagons. I do not know if I can do this," I admitted, sinking onto the sofa. "I feel like I'm fighting a tank with a plastic fork." "You are not alone," Nolan said. "You have Maya. You have me. You have, well, you have the truth. And usually, that counts for something." I took that thought to therapy the next day. "Doctor," Evans listened as I read the email again, dissecting the clinical cruelty of it. "It feels like a business transaction," I said, wiping my eyes. "Like I am a disgruntled employee they are trying to fire. That is how they function." "Doctor," Evans said gently, "to them. The family is a corporation. You are disrupting the brand. You are asking for an audit. Their reaction is defensive because you are challenging their control. But I just wanted a mom." I whispered. "I just wanted them to say, 'Oh, Kennedy, we messed up. Let's fix it.'" "I know," she said, "and grieving the parents you wanted versus accepting the parents you have is the hardest work you will ever do. But look at what they are showing you. They are showing you that they value their secrets more than their relationship with you. Do you accept that?" "No," I said. I realized, with a jolt, that I didn't. "No, I don't accept it." February dragged on, bringing with it the commercial explosion of Valentine's Day. At the insurance office, the mood was damp and dreary, but at Sweet Harbor my kitchen things were frantic. I had anticipated a few orders for cookies and cupcakes. I hadn't anticipated the rush. Apparently, my start-over story had legs. People in Maple Grove loved a calm, persistent underdog. I had posted a picture of a Valentine's cake on the community forum, a dark chocolate ganache with raspberry filling with a simple caption, "Sweetness for when life is a little bitter." The orders poured in. I was baking until 2 a.m. every night. My apartment smelled perpetually of melted chocolate and strawberry reduction. One afternoon, I was delivering a box of heart-shaped sugar cookies to Mrs. Gable, the librarian at the elementary school. She met me at the front desk, adjusting her glasses. "These look wonderful." "Kennedy," she said, peeking inside the box. "You know, I saw your mother at the grocery store in Brookfield the other day." I stiffened. "Oh." She didn't look happy, Mrs. Gable noted, lowering her voice. "And when someone asked about you, I think it was Linda from the PT. Your mother just turned her cart around and walked away." I looked down at my boots. "I am sorry she was rude." Mrs. Gable reached out and touched my arm. "You have nothing to apologize for. People talk. Kennedy, we know you work hard. We know you are a good mother. Don't let the Brookfield chill get to you." Later that same week, a customer named Sarah came to pick up a cake for her Galentine's party. She was a woman about my age, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. As I handed her the box, she lingered in the doorway. I heard about what happened at Christmas," she said, looking embarrassed. "Not the details, just that it was bad." I tensed, ready to defend myself. "It was complicated. I know," she said quickly. "I just wanted to say, I haven't spoken to my father in 3 years. He has never met my youngest son." I looked at her, surprised. "It is hard," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "In a town like this, where everyone posts photos of their perfect multi-generational holidays. You feel like a monster, like you are the only one who couldn't make it work. I feel that every day. I admitted, "You aren't a monster." "Kennedy," she said, "sometimes, walking away is the only way to survive." She squeezed my hand, took her cake, and left. I stood in the hallway for a long time. I realized that my parents' attempt to shame me into silence was backfiring. By casting me out, they hadn't isolated me. They had pushed me into a community of people who understood exactly what it meant to be broken and glued back together. The real turning point came on a Tuesday night, in the form of a Facebook message. My phone pinged while I was washing dishes. I dried my hands and glanced at the screen. The name was familiar, sending a wave of nostalgia through me. "Barbara Ramsey sent you a message. Ms. Ramsey." She had been my English teacher in high school, and later, a friend of Grandma Eleanor's. They used to play bridge together at the senior center. I opened the message. "Dear Kennedy, I hope this message finds you well. Though I have heard rumblings that things are difficult right now, I do not usually interfere in family matters, but my conscience has been bothering me. I heard from Mrs. Delgado that there is some dispute about Eleanor's cabin. I wanted you to know something. About 6 months before Eleanor passed, she brought a document to our bridge game. It was a draft of her will. She was very agitated about it. She showed me a section specifically regarding the Cedar Hollow property. She asked me, 'Barbara, does this make it clear I want Kennedy to have the cabin, free and clear of Charles's debts?' I read it. It was very explicit. It left the cabin to you. She told me she was going to sign it the next week. I do not know if she ever did, or if your parents convinced her otherwise, but I can testify that her intent was absolute. She wanted you to have that place. If you need someone to say that to a lawyer or a judge, I am willing, warmly, Barbara Ramsey." I sat down on the kitchen floor, right there on the linoleum. I read the message 3 times. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. It wasn't just Grandma's sad, private letters. It was a witness, a credible, third-party witness who had seen the draft will. I forwarded the message to Maya immediately. 10 minutes later, Maya called me. "This is it," Maya said, her voice buzzing with energy. "This is the leverage. Explain it to me." I said, "We have the deed in your name. We have the history of your parents hiding the asset. And now, we have a witness who can establish testamentary intent. We can argue that the cabin was a specific bequest that your parents, as trustees, tried to suppress. By failing to inform you, by failing to turn over the keys, and by letting the taxes go into default, they breached their fiduciary duty. Does that mean we can win?" "It means we have enough to file a petition that will terrify them." Maya said, "It means we can force them to open the books on the entire trust. If they misused funds, if they took that savings account Eleanor mentioned and rolled it into their own accounts, we will find it. But it means war." I said, "A public court case." "Yes," Maya said softly. "It does. Peterson and Finch will drag this out. It will be ugly. Are you ready for that?" I didn't answer immediately. I left work late that evening. It had started to snow again. Big, fat flakes that swirled in the headlights of the Civic. I picked Harper up from the after-school program. She was sleepy, clutching a drawing she had made. "Did you eat?" I asked. "We had pizza," she mumbled. "Mommy, can we listen to music?" I turned on the radio. The local station was playing a mix of soft rock, but then, inexplicably, a Christmas song came on. Silent Night. It was late February, but sometimes the playlists lingered. I went to change the station, but Harper stopped me. "No, leave it," she said. "I like this one." She started to sing along, her voice high and pure and slightly off-key. "Sleep in Heavenly Peace." I drove through the dark streets of Maple Grove. I thought about the email from the law firm. "Do not contact our clients." I thought about my mother turning her cart around in the grocery store. I thought about my father's finger pointing at the door. For 32 years, I had tried to be the daughter they wanted. I had made myself small. I had accepted their criticism as truth. I had believed that if I just tried harder, if I just baked a better cake, If I just earned a little more money. They would finally look at me with pride, but they never would, because their love was a currency I could never afford. I listened to Harper singing in the back seat. She was so full of light. She didn't know yet that the world could be cruel. She didn't know that people who were supposed to love you could treat you like a line item on a ledger. If I walked away now, if I let them keep the money, if I let them bully me out of the cabin, what story was I writing for her? I would be teaching her that when people hurt you, you hide. I would be teaching her that power wins over truth. I would be teaching her that she doesn't deserve to fight for what is hers. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The fear was still there, the deep, conditioned fear of disappointing my parents. But beneath it, something stronger was taking root, a fierce, protective anger, not for myself, but for the little girl in the back seat, and for the grandmother who had tried to save me. I wasn't going to let them erase Eleanor's wish, and I wasn't going to let them erase me. The song ended. The DJ came on, making a joke about lingering holiday spirits. Mommy Harper asked, "Why are you crying?" I reached up and touched my cheek. I hadn't realized I was crying. I wiped the tears away. "I am not sad, baby," I said, looking at her in the rearview mirror. "I am just deciding something." "What did you decide?" "I decided that we are going to fight for our cabin," I said, "and we are going to win." I pulled the car into our parking spot. I turned off the engine. I took out my phone and typed a text to Maya. "File the petition. Let's go." I hit send, and for the first time in months, the knot in my chest loosened. I took a deep breath of the cold winter air, and it tasted like freedom. The decision to send the demand letter felt less like a legal maneuver and more like stepping onto a bridge made of glass. I sat in Maya's office, my hands folded tightly in my lap, watching her slide the document across the mahogany desk for my final review. It was polite. That was the most important thing to me. Despite everything, the Christmas banishment, the hidden tax bills, the lies I still clung to, a desperate, childlike hope that if I just asked nicely enough, my parents would wake up. I wanted to believe that if they saw the facts laid out in black and white, they would feel a flicker of shame, or at least a desire to make things right without a judge involved. The letter requested 3 things: a full accounting of the Hayes family trust, specifically regarding the assets left by Eleanor Vance, documentation of the granddaughter's savings account that had vanished into their control, and reimbursement for the $4,822 I had paid to save the cabin from seizure. It also proposed a mediation session, a quiet room, a neutral third party, a chance to talk. "It is a good letter." "Kennedy," Maya said, capping her pen, "it is firm but not aggressive. It gives them an off-ramp. If they have any sense, they will take it." I nodded, staring at the signature line. "Do you think they will?" Maya hesitated, her eyes softening. "People with power rarely give it up voluntarily, but we have to try." We sent it via certified mail. I spent the next week jumping every time my phone buzzed. I imagined my father reading it in his study, his face turning that dark shade of purple. I imagined my mother weeping into her morning coffee. Finally realizing she had pushed me too far, I was wrong on both counts. The response arrived 10 days later. It came not from my parents, but from the polished, shark-like offices of Peterson and Finch. Maya called me during my lunch break. "It is here," she said. Her voice was flat. "And come by after work." "Kennedy." I drove to her office with a knot in my stomach that felt like a clenched fist. When I sat down, Maya didn't slide the letter across the desk. She held it in her hands, as if protecting me from the physical blow of the words. "They are declining mediation," she said. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Okay. And the rest?" Maya put her glasses on and looked down at the paper. "They assert that Charles and Margaret acted entirely within their discretion as parents and trustees. They claim that the cabin transfer was a generous gift that you failed to maintain. Regarding the savings account," she paused, her jaw tightening. "They claim that Eleanor was not fully competent when she wrote those letters to you, and that her references to a separate savings account were the confused ramblings of a woman in cognitive decline. I stood up. I couldn't help it. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. She was not confused, I said, my voice rising. She was the sharpest person in that family until the day she died. She beat them at bridge a week before she passed. Sit down. Kennedy, Maya said gently, there is more. I sank back into the chair, shaking. They characterize your inquiries as harassing and based on fundamental misunderstandings of estate law. They say you are causing undue stress to your elderly parents. Elderly, I scoffed. Dad played 18 holes of golf last week. Mom runs a committee. They are 62. And finally, Maya said, reaching the bottom of the page, they have included a check. For the taxes, I asked, a sliver of hope returning, for $500. Maya said, marked as a goodwill gesture to help you with your current financial difficulties, they are refusing to reimburse the full tax amount because they say the property is yours, and therefore the debt was yours. $500. It was an insult. It was a tip left on a table after a bad meal. It was them saying, here is some pocket money, little girl. Now go away. I stared at the wall, feeling a cold numbness spread through my limbs. They called Grandma crazy. They called me a harasser. And they threw $500 at me like I was a beggar. So that is it, I whispered. They chose war. Maya nodded slowly. They chose war. The reality of what came next was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Maya laid it out for me with brutal honesty. If I wanted to see the trust documents, if I wanted to prove that they had stolen the money Grandma left for me, I had to file a formal petition in probate court. It will become public record. Maya warned, in a town like Northbridge, people will notice. The court docket is published in the paper. Everyone will know you are suing your parents. I spent 3 nights staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, watching the shadows of passing cars move across the plaster. I thought about the word sue. It felt dirty. It felt like something greedy people did on television. I thought about the holidays. If I filed this petition, there would be no going back. I would be the daughter who took her parents to court. I would be the villain in every story they told for the rest of their lives. I pictured Harper at 10, at 15, at 20. I pictured her asking why she never saw her grandparents. I pictured an empty table at Thanksgiving. Am I destroying the family? I asked myself in the dark. Is it worth it for a cabin and some money? But then I would think about the letter from Grandma. I want you to always have a home that is yours, not theirs. And I would think about the tax notices they hid. They hadn't just taken money. They had tried to take my safety. They had tried to take the one thing Grandma had given me to ensure I could stand on my own feet, while my personal life was collapsing into a legal black hole. My professional life took a strange, sharp turn upward. It started with Nolan. He found me crying in the break room one Tuesday, clutching a stale donut. You look like you're about to crumble, he said. Sitting down next to me, I am, I admitted. I have to pay Maya a retainer for the next phase, and I am broke, and I am terrified. You need to sell more cakes, Nolan said practically. You are good at it, but you are playing small. I do not have a marketing budget. Nolan, you do not need a budget. You need a story. He pulled out his phone. Look at this forum. Northbridge Community Voices. It has 5,000 members. People love a sob story. Kennedy. But more than that, they love a survivor. I am not posting my dirty laundry on the internet. I said, horrified. Don't name them. He said, keep it anonymous. Just say you are a single mom starting over after a family crisis. Say you are building something sweet out of something bitter. I hesitated. It felt manipulative. But I also looked at my bank account balance. It was double digits again. That night, I baked a vanilla bean cake with lemon curd filling. I frosted it with pale blue buttercream and edible gold leaf. I took a photo of it on my small kitchen table, with Harper's hand reaching into the frame to steal a sprinkle. I wrote the caption, "Starting over is hard, especially when the people who were supposed to be your safety net cut the ropes. This Christmas, I learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stay when things get cold. I'm a single mom building a new life. One cake at a time. If you need something sweet for a birthday, a Tuesday, or just to remind yourself that joy is still possible, I'd love to bake for you. I posted it to the forum under the page name Sweet Harbor. I went to sleep expecting nothing. When I woke up, I had 42 notifications. There were orders, 3 birthdays, a baby shower, a retirement party, but there were also messages, private messages from strangers in Maple Grove and Northbridge. I don't know who you are, but I needed to read this today. My parents haven't spoken to me in 10 years. Keep going. Mama. Your cakes look beautiful. I'd like to order 2 dozen cupcakes. I don't even need them. I just want to support you. I sat at the table and cried into my oatmeal. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of relief. I wasn't the only one. My parents had made me feel like I was a unique failure, a broken anomaly, but I wasn't. I was part of a silent legion of people who had been hurt by their families and were trying to build something new. The emotional surge from the bakery kept me afloat for a week, and then Lauren called. It was a Thursday evening. I saw her name on the screen and debated letting it go to voicemail. But a part of me, the sister part, still wanted to connect. Hello, I answered. You are ruining everything, Lauren said. No preamble. No hello. Just pure, distilled accusation. Hello to you too. Lauren, I said, leaning against the counter. Mom is a wreck. Kennedy. She is on blood pressure medication. Dad is talking to lawyers all day. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted to humiliate us? I didn't start this. Lauren. They kicked me out. They hid the cabin deed. Oh, the cabin. The cabin, Lauren shouted. It is always about money with you, isn't it? You are just jealous because Mark and I are successful and you are stuck in that apartment. I closed my eyes. It is not about jealousy. It is about the fact that Grandma left that place to me, and they tried to steal it. They didn't steal it. They were managing it because they knew you would mess it up, just like you messed up your marriage. That stung. But I held my ground. If they were managing it for me, why did they let the taxes go unpaid for 2 years? Why was it about to be seized? Silence on the other end. Then, a huff of breath. Look, they needed the cash flow. Okay, Dad's business had a bad quarter. They had to prioritize. Prioritize, I repeated. Prioritize what? Things life helping family who actually appreciate it. And then she slipped. It was a moment of anger. A loose thread pulled in the heat of the argument. When Mark lost his job 3 years ago, who do you think paid our mortgage? Who do you think paid for the remodel so we could flip the house? They helped us because we are family. They used the trust money because that is what it is for helping family. I stood very still. You just said they used the trust money to pay your mortgage. Lauren went silent. I could hear her breathing, a sharp intake of air. I didn't. They helped us. I don't know which account it came from. You said trust money. Lauren, Eleanor's money. You are twisting my words. Stop trying to trap me. You are just bitter because they helped us and not you. No. Lauren, I said, my voice eerily calm. I am not bitter. I am clarified. I hung up the phone. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange, cold precision settling over me. They had used Grandma's money she likely intended for all of us, or specifically for me, given the letters to fund Lauren's lifestyle, to prop up Charles's failing business, and when I needed $500 for a car repair, they had lectured me on responsibility. It wasn't just favoritism, it was embezzlement. I went to see Dr. Evans the next day. I sat on her beige couch and recounted the conversation with Lauren. I kept waiting to feel guilty. I told her. I kept waiting to feel like the bad daughter. But when she said that, when she admitted they drained the accounts to help her while I was drowning, something snapped. What snapped, Doctor? Evans asked. The tether. I said, the cord that made me want their approval. I realized they don't just dislike me. They robbed me. Doctor? Evans nodded slowly. You are moving from the emotional framework of a child seeking love to the ethical framework of an adult seeking justice. It is a breach of trust, I said, testing the words. Yes. It is abuse. Yes. I looked at my hands. I have been so afraid of hurting them, of embarrassing them, but they didn't care about hurting me. They didn't care about Harper. They were willing to let us lose everything as long as they kept their secrets. I looked up at her. I am going to file the petition. Doctor. Evans smiled. A genuine, proud smile. Good. The morning Maya filed the petition. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. It felt like a sign. We were challenging the accounting of the Hayes family trust. We were asserting my ownership of the cabin. We were demanding restitution for the misuse of funds. The legal machine ground into motion. It was slow, loud, and ugly. First came the discovery phase. We demanded bank records. They stalled. We demanded emails. They claimed privilege. Maya had to file motion after motion just to get them to hand over basic documents. Then came the depositions. I will never forget the day of my deposition. It was held in a conference room at Peterson and Finch. The table was long and polished to a mirror shine. My parents sat at the far end, flanked by Preston Finch, a man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. They didn't look at me, not once. They looked at their papers. They looked at the wall. They looked at the stenographer. Mr. Finch began the questioning. His voice was smooth, like oil on water. Ms. Hayes, he said, you have a history of financial instability. Is that correct? I am a single mother. I said, I work full-time. Yes, but you have struggled. You have asked your parents for money before. Small amounts, rarely, and you have a history of emotional volatility. Objection, Maya said sharply, vague and argumentative. Mr. Finch smiled. Let me rephrase. Did you seek therapy following your divorce? Yes. Did you take medication for anxiety? Yes. And would you say that your anxiety sometimes clouds your judgment? That it makes you paranoid? That it makes you believe things that aren't true? I gripped the edge of the table. I saw what he was doing. He was building the narrative. Crazy Kennedy. Poor, unstable Kennedy. My anxiety, I said, my voice trembling slightly, was a reaction to my husband leaving me. It does not affect my ability to read a property deed or a bank statement. Mr. Finch shuffled his papers. We have testimony from your mother that you have always been dramatic, that you often felt persecuted by your sister's success. Do you think this lawsuit is just another way to get attention? I looked down the table at my mother. She was studying her cuticles. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was letting this man flay me open, using my childhood pain as ammunition. I looked back at Mr. Finch. I think, I said clearly, that my grandmother left me a home because she knew this day would come. She knew I would need protection from the people sitting next to you. My father's head snapped up. His eyes were cold, hard flint. The deposition lasted 6 hours. By the end, I felt hollowed out. I felt like they had taken a scraper to the inside of my skull. But as we walked out of the building, Maya put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, she said. You didn't break. They hate me. I whispered. No, she said. They fear you. And today, they saw that they can't bully you into silence. The months bled into winter again. The trees lost their leaves. The air turned sharp. We had a court date set for mid-December. The motion for summary judgment. It was the big one. But before that, I needed to do something. I needed to reclaim the ground. On the first Saturday of December, I drove to Cedar Hollow. But this time, I didn't go alone, and I didn't go in fear. I brought Harper. I brought Nolan. I brought Aunt Jo, who had driven 3 hours on her bad hip to be there. I brought Sarah, the customer who had become a friend. We brought boxes of thrifted ornaments I had collected over the year, glass balls from the 50s, wooden stars, hand-knit stockings. We brought garlands of popcorn and cranberries that Harper and I had strung together while watching movies. The cabin was still rough. The paint was peeling, and the heating system was finicky. But the taxes were paid, the electricity was on, and it was mine. We spent the day cleaning and decorating. Nolan climbed a ladder to hang a wreath on the highest peak of the roof. Aunt Jo sat in the armchair which we had uncovered and dusted, telling stories about Grandma Eleanor that made us all laugh until our sides hurt. She used to hide gin in the watering can, Jo wheezed, wiping her eyes. She said it was fertilizer for the spirit. Harper was running around with Mrs. Delgado's dog, her laughter bouncing off the wooden walls. She looked happy. She looked free. As the sun went down, we lit a fire in the hearth. The smell of wood smoke filled the room, mixing with the scent of the spiced cider I had heating on the stove. I stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at them, my chosen family. Nolan was teasing Sarah about her rapping skills. Aunt Jo was teaching Harper how to play solitaire. It wasn't the Christmas dinner I had grown up with. There was no mahogany table. There was no crystal. There was no tension so thick you could choke on it. There was just warmth, imperfect, messy, cobbled together warmth. I walked over to the mantel. I placed a framed photo of Grandma Eleanor there, right in the center. I am terrified. I whispered to the photo, "We go to court next week. They might win. They have expensive lawyers and years of practice at lying." But then I looked back at Harper. She was safe here. She was loved here. I touched the frame. But they can't take this. I thought, they can't take the memory of who she was. And they can't take the fact that for the first time in my life, I am fighting back. Nolan looked up and caught my eye. He raised his mug in a toast. "To the cabin," he said. "To the cabin." Everyone echoed, "To the brave." Aunt Jo added, looking right at me. I smiled, and for the first time since that terrible dinner a year ago, the knot in my chest was gone completely. I was ready for court. I was ready for whatever they threw at me, because I finally knew who I was. And more importantly, I knew who I wasn't. I wasn't their disappointment anymore. I was Kennedy Hayes, and I was home. The Cedar Hollow County Courthouse looked like a fortress built to withstand a siege, its gray stone walls rising sharply against the December sky. It was almost exactly 1 year since I had walked out of my parents' house in the freezing dark, my daughter's hand in mine, and my life in tatters. Now, the air smelled the same crisp, metallic, smelling of coming snow, but I was different. I sat at the petitioner's table next to Maya, smoothing the fabric of my black slacks. I wasn't wearing an expensive suit. I was wearing a blazer I had bought on sale and a blouse that I had ironed 3 times that morning to ensure there wasn't a single wrinkle. My hands were shaking, just a little, so I tucked them into my lap and squeezed the small, smooth object in my right palm. It was a river stone. Harper had painted it for me the night before. She had covered it in blue glitter glue and painted a wobbly yellow sun in the center. For brave days. She had told me, "So you remember, you are the boss." I squeezed the stone until the edges bit into my skin. I am the boss. I thought, I am the owner. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. Margaret and Charles Hayes walked in. They looked immaculate. My father wore his charcoal suit, the one he wore to board meetings when he was about to acquire a company or fire a manager. My mother was in a navy wool coat, her hair coiffed into a helmet of perfection. Flanking them was Preston Finch, their attorney, who carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my car. They walked down the center aisle. I watched them, waiting for them to look at me. I waited for a nod, a grimace, even a glare, but they looked straight ahead, their eyes fixed on the judge's bench as if I were invisible, as if I were a ghost they had already exorcised. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison entered. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and an expression of permanent, weary patience. She sat down, adjusted her robes, and looked over the rim of her glasses at the courtroom. In the matter of the estate of Eleanor Vance and the Hayes Family Trust, she read, "We are here on the petitioner's motion for accounting and declaratory judgment regarding real property." Maya stood up. Her voice was clear and sharp, cutting through the muffled quiet of the room. "Your Honor, we are here because Kennedy Hayes was deliberately misled by the trustees, her parents, regarding her ownership of a home and the existence of funds intended for her support. We are here to ask the court to enforce the wishes of a grandmother who wanted her granddaughter to be safe. Preston Finch stood up next, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, we are here because a disgruntled daughter, who has a history of financial instability, is attempting to rewrite her grandmother's estate plan to suit her current needs. My clients have acted with prudence and discretion to protect the family assets. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Prudence, that was a nice word for theft. I was the first witness called to the stand. The walk from the table to the witness box felt miles long. I could feel my parents' eyes on my back now, heavy and judgmental. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. Maya walked toward me. She smiled, a tiny, reassuring twitch of her lips. Kennedy, tell the court what happened on December 25th of last year. I took a breath. I told the story. I spoke about the dinner, the criticism, the way the conversation turned to money. I repeated the words my father had shouted, the words that had echoed in my nightmares for months. Leave and never return. And after you left, Maya asked, did you have any contact with your parents? I received one text message from my mother, telling me I chose to walk out. I said, and then nothing. Until I received a tax notice for a cabin I didn't know I owned. I described the discovery, the trip to Cedar Hollow, Mrs. Delgado, the lockbox. When I found the letters, I said, looking directly at the judge, I realized that my grandmother had been trying to talk to me from the grave. She knew. She knew they would try to absorb everything into the collective family pot where I would never see it. Mr. Finch stood up for cross-examination. He walked toward me with the stride of a predator. Ms. Hayes, he said, leaning on the railing, you admit that you have struggled financially since your divorce. Yes, I said. You admit you have asked your parents for money in the past. Yes. So isn't it true that your parents, knowing your history, might have kept the cabin in a trust-like management to ensure you didn't sell it, to ensure you didn't lose it to creditors, to protect you from yourself? I gripped the glittery stone in my pocket. If they were protecting it for me, I said, keeping my voice steady, they would have paid the taxes. Instead, they let it go into default. They let it get within weeks of seizure. That is not protection. Mr. Finch, that is negligence. And they did it while I was asking them for help with groceries. Finch paused. He hadn't expected me to snap back, but you have no proof, other than a few handwritten letters from an elderly woman who was clearly confused, that there was ever a separate savings account. She was not confused. I said fiercely. She was the only one who saw me clearly. And as for proof, that is why we are here, to open the books. If the money isn't there, show me. But you won't show me. I stepped down. My legs felt like jelly. But I held my head high. Maya then began to lay out the paper trail. It was a forensic dismantling of the happy family myth. She presented the deed. Signed by my father in 2019, she presented the tax records showing the payments stopping abruptly, and then she introduced the affidavit from Miss Ramsey, the teacher. I would like to read into the record a statement from Barbara Ramsey, a witness to Eleanor Vance's intent. Maya said, I watched my mother's face as Maya read. Margaret Hayes went pale. She knew Barbara Ramsey. She knew that Barbara was a woman of unimpeachable reputation in Northbridge. Hearing Barbara confirm that Eleanor was afraid of her own daughter's greed was a blow Margaret hadn't seen coming. Then Maya projected a spreadsheet onto the courtroom screen. These are records obtained during discovery regarding the Hayes Family Trust. Maya explained, they show disbursements over the last 5 years. She pointed to a laser line on the screen. $40,000 for a wedding venue. Beneficiary Lauren Hayes. $25,000 for a business loan. Beneficiary Charles Hayes. $15,000 for home renovation. Beneficiary Lauren Hayes. And here, Maya said, pointing to the bottom, a list of disbursements to Kennedy Hayes. The list was blank, Your Honor, Maya said. Turning to the judge, the respondents claim they put everything into one pot to support both daughters. But the math says otherwise. One daughter was being funded. The other was being starved out. And the assets used to fund the first daughter came from the estate of the grandmother who explicitly wanted to protect the second daughter. Charles took the stand. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man trying to explain away a bad investment. We were managing the total portfolio. He insisted, wiping sweat from his upper lip. The cabin is a drain. It is a money pit. We didn't tell Kennedy because we didn't want to burden her with the upkeep until she was on her feet. So you protected her from the burden of the cabin? The judge asked, her voice dry. By transferring the deed to her name so she would be legally liable for the taxes, but not giving her the keys so she could use the property. It was an administrative decision. Charles stammered, to simplify the tax burden on the main trust. So you used your daughter as a tax shelter? The judge asked. No. We intended to bring her into the fold eventually. When she showed more maturity, Maya repeated during her cross-examination. Mr. Hayes, your daughter is 33. She has raised a child alone. She runs a business. At what age does she qualify for the truth? Charles didn't answer. He just glared at me. Then it was Margaret's turn. She walked to the stand with a stiff, brittle dignity. She sat down and smoothed her skirt. Mrs. Hayes, the judge said, looking at her over her glasses. I have a question. Yes, Your Honor. You have sat here today and listened to your daughter describe a year of isolation. You have heard her describe finding a seizure notice on her door. You claim that your goal, as a mother and a trustee, was family unity, that you wanted to protect the family legacy. Margaret nodded. Yes, that is all we ever wanted. Then tell me, the judge continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper that carried more weight than a shout. When your daughter emailed you in February, an email that was polite, factual, and asking for clarification about her grandmother's estate, why was your first instinct to have a lawyer send her a cease and desist letter? The courtroom went dead silent. A radiator hissed in the corner. Margaret opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at Finch, who was staring at his shoes. She looked at Charles. She started. Why didn't you pick up the phone the judge pressed? Why didn't you call your child? Margaret looked at me then. For the first time in a year, she really looked at me, and I saw the cracks in the porcelain. I saw the fear. She realized, in that moment, that she couldn't explain it. She couldn't explain it because there was no loving explanation. There was only control. We were hurt. Margaret whispered, we felt attacked. So you attacked back, the judge said, with the full weight of your legal team, against a single mother who bakes cakes for a living. Margaret looked down at her hands. A flush of red crept up her neck, staining her perfect skin. It was shame. Pure, unadulterated shame. I have no further questions, the judge said. We took a recess. I sat in the hallway on a wooden bench, drinking lukewarm water from a paper cup. Maya sat next to me. You won, she said quietly. I don't know. I said, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surgery, necessary, but painful. When we went back inside, the judge didn't waste time. I am ready to issue a preliminary ruling, she said. She shuffled her papers. First, regarding the real property known as 44 Pine Ridge Road, the deed is clear. Kennedy Hayes is the sole legal owner. The court finds that the respondents, Charles and Margaret Hayes, acted in bad faith by concealing this ownership while simultaneously allowing tax liabilities to accrue. She looked at my parents. Respondents are ordered to reimburse the petitioner for the full amount of the tax bill, $4,822. Furthermore, due to the neglect of the property while under their de facto management, respondents are ordered to pay an additional $10,000 for deferred maintenance and repairs. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Second, regarding the Hayes Family Trust, the evidence presented today raises significant questions about whether the fiduciary duties of the trustees have been breached. The discrepancy in support between the two beneficiaries and the potential commingling of funds intended for Kennedy Hayes is alarming. She brought her gavel down, not with a bang, but with a firm tap. I am ordering a full, independent forensic accounting of the trust and the estate of Eleanor Vance, to be paid for by the respondents. If funds earmarked for the petitioner were diverted, they will be restored." She leaned forward. "And finally, I am going to make a strong suggestion. You are a family. This court can solve your math problems. It cannot solve your heart problems. I am ordering you to attend mediation to settle the final distribution of assets, but I suggest you use that time to decide if you want to be a family, or if you just want to be litigants, because right now, you are on a path to total estrangement, and no amount of money is worth that." Court is adjourned. The gavel hit. It was over. I stood up. My knees felt weak. Maya hugged me. A fierce, professional squeeze. "We did it," she whispered. We walked out of the courtroom and into the lobby. The afternoon sun was streaming through the high windows, bathing the dust motes in gold. It was winter light, cold but bright. "Kennedy." I turned. My parents were standing near the exit. Charles looked deflated. His shoulders slumped in his expensive suit. Margaret looked like she had aged 10 years in 2 hours. I signaled Maya to wait by the door. I walked over to them, stopping a few feet away. I kept my hands in my pockets, touching the stone. "Kennedy," Margaret said. Her voice was thin. We didn't know it would go this way." "No," I said. "You didn't think I would fight back." Charles sighed, running a hand through his gray hair. "We never meant for things to go this far. Kennedy, we thought we were doing what was best. Managing the whole picture. Managing me." I corrected. "You were managing me." Margaret reached out a hand, then dropped it when she saw I didn't move. Is there a way to fix this?" she asked. "The judge. She said we should try. We don't want to lose you." "Kennedy, we don't want to lose Harper." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had defined my worth for 33 years. I saw their regret. Yes, but I also saw that they still didn't quite get it. They were sorry they lost. They were sorry they were embarrassed. I wasn't sure if they were sorry for the pain they caused. "I need time," I said. "How much time?" Charles asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "A lot. You didn't just hurt my feelings. Dad, you tried to take my home. You tried to gaslight me into thinking Grandma was crazy. You have to understand that trust isn't a switch you can just flip back on because a judge told you to." "But Christmas is next week," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "I know," I said, "and Harper and I will be spending it at the cabin, our cabin." I took a step back. "If we do this, if we try to find a way back, it happens on my terms. No more comments about my job, no more comments about my money, and complete transparency. If you lie to me again, even a white lie, we are done, permanently. We understand." Charles mumbled, looking at the floor. "And Harper," I added, my voice hardening. "You do not get access to her until I feel safe. She is not a prop for your holiday photos. She is my daughter, and I am the one who protects her." Margaret nodded, tears finally spilling over her lashes. Okay. Kennedy." I turned to leave. "Kennedy." Margaret called out. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "Your grandmother," she said, her voice choking. "She would have been proud of you today." I closed my eyes, letting the words hit me. They were the words I had waited a lifetime to hear from her, and while they were late and forced out by a court order, they still mattered. "I know," I said, and I walked out the door, into the cold, clean air of the parking lot, where the snow had just started to fall. Christmas Eve arrived with a hush. The woods around Cedar Hollow were blanketed in 6 inches of fresh powder. Turning the world into a black and white photograph, inside the cabin, however, everything was technicolor. We had pushed the old, scarred kitchen table into the center of the living room, near the fire. It was set with a chaotic mix of dishes, my white plates, Mrs. Delgado's floral teacups, and paper napkins with Santa Claus on them that Nolan had brought. The cabin smelled of pine, roasting chicken, and the apple pie that was cooling on the counter, my grandmother's recipe, finally baked in her own oven again. Nolan was trying to teach Aunt Jo how to take a selfie. You have to look at the lens. Josephine, not the screen, he laughed. Oh, hush. Joe swatted at him. I look like a prune in high definition anyway. Harper was sitting on the rug, wearing a pair of reindeer antlers and showing Mrs. Delgado her sketchbook. And this is the judge, Harper was explaining, pointing to a drawing of a woman with a gavel. She was the referee. She made sure Mommy won. Mrs. Delgado smiled, stroking Harper's hair. She certainly did. Mi amor. She certainly did. I stood by the mantel, holding a glass of wine. I looked around the room. It wasn't the Christmas I had pictured 2 years ago. It wasn't the perfect, curated holiday of Brookfield. There were drafts near the window. The plumbing groaned when you flushed the toilet. We didn't have a pile of expensive gifts under the tree, but the air in the room was light. There was no tension. No one was waiting for a criticism. No one was checking their watch. I looked down at the mantel. Next to the photo of Grandma Eleanor, there was a card. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The return address was embossed, the Hayes family. It had arrived in the mail yesterday. I hadn't opened it. I didn't know if it contained a check, a letter, or just a signature. Nolan walked over and stood next to me. He followed my gaze to the card. Going to open it, he asked quietly. Not tonight, I said. I picked up the card and tucked it behind Grandma's photo. It could wait. The past was there, and it always would be. But tonight was about the present. I looked at my phone, which was buzzing on the side table. It was a number I didn't recognize. Maybe it was Lauren, finally calling to talk without screaming. Maybe it was my mother. Or maybe it was just a telemarketer. I let it buzz. Mommy Harper yelled, Aunt Jo is cheating at Go Fish. I am not? Joe protested. I am utilizing strategic resource management. I smiled. I took a sip of wine. I felt the heat of the fire on my face and the warmth of the people who actually loved me in my bones. I am coming, I called out. I walked toward the table, leaving the phone buzzing, leaving the card unopened, leaving the ghosts at the door. I sat down between my daughter and my aunt, and as the snow fell softly outside, covering the tracks of everything that had come before, I picked up my cards and began to play. Thank you so much for listening to Kennedy's story. It's been a long journey from that freezing night in Brookfield to the warmth of the cabin in Cedar Hollow, and I hope this ending brought you as much peace as it did for me. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a cozy kitchen in London, a busy commute in New York, or maybe a quiet evening in Sydney? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and finding your true family, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. What did you think of Kennedy's decision at the end? Should she have opened the card? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, stay brave.